Hi everybody, I had a request for a Pmag comparison video between Gen 2s and Gen 3s, so I thought I would oblige that request. For comparison's sake, I'll go down the line of what we got here. We got 20 round Generation 2 Pmag. The reason why I have a 20 rounder is because it's just nice to have a 20 round Pmag. I have it for my service rifle, competition service rifle, high power competition, and it's just nicer having a 20 round magazine when you're shooting from the prone and sitting positions. It's just not in your way as much. Then we have a Generation 2 non-windowed 30 rounder. We have a Generation 2 windowed 30 rounder. Then to compare, we have your standard GI type mag. And then we have a Generation 3 windowed 30 rounder, Generation 3 non-windowed 30 rounder, and last but not least, my recently acquired brand new 40 rounder, which is non-windowed. But if they did make a window for it, I have a feeling I would probably buy one. Alright, so we'll just get rid of we'll go to the main comparison, of the main differences. Difference number one that I want to make sure I get out of the way right away before I forget is the difference between, I did not think that the Magpul would make them differently, but there is a difference between the floor plates of a Gen 2 and a Gen 3. I don't know why, but they are different. The Generation 3s say Pmag in here, right here it'll say Pmag. On the Gen 2s they say Pmag out here. So you ask, why does a Generation 3 dust cover not fit on a Generation 2? Well, that's a good question. Here's a Generation 3 on a Gen 2, and basically what happens is the dust cover doesn't want to latch. It doesn't want to click into place. So you cannot use a Generation 3 dust cover on a Generation 2, because if it was a Generation 2, it would clip on no problem. As for going the other way around, you can take a Generation 3, and if you take the Generation 3 dust cover also, snaps right on, no problem. If you take the Generation 2 dust cover and put it on a Gen 3, it also does fit. So you can put a Generation 2 on a Generation 3, but you cannot put a Generation 3 on a Generation 2. I'm not quite sure why. It just does not want to click in that very last spot right there. So no Generation 3 dust covers on Gen 2s, but you can use Gen 2 dust covers on Generation 3s. Alright, so now that we got that out of the way, we'll go over kind of the main differences of the mag. I'm using a windowed Gen 2 and comparing it to a non-windowed Gen 3, but rest assured, the reason for that is that these are loaded and I don't feel like unloading them, but rest assured there's not a difference between a windowed and non-windowed between the generations. They both look the same. If you really want to get into the nitty-gritty specifications as to what makes a Generation 3 so much more different, you can just go on the Magpul website and they explain a lot on there. But one of the main differences is that a Generation 3 Pmag has the newer, more advanced, upgraded version of Magpul's polymer. So, it's stronger. I can't say whether or not it's lighter or anything like that, but the new polymer is supposed to be nicer than the second generation of Magpul's polymer that's on the Gen 2s. As far as visually, the Generation 3 polymer actually looks like a blacker black, and almost not shinier or brighter or anything like that, but the Generation 2 looks more of a flat black, and this is going to be something that's not very visible on camera, so you might have to take my word for it, but it does seem to be a darker black in the Gen 3s, so it does make sense that it is the upgraded polymer. Alright, so I'm going to go over as quickly as possible just the differences that are really going to matter to you. Kind of a more simplified version. For a user, the most obvious differences visually are that there's added stippling right here on the Gen 3. Gen 2 does not have that, it just says Pmag 30. Same thing with the front of the mag, extra ridges. Back of the mag, same thing, added ridges on the Gen 3, not so on the Gen 2. Another thing that is on a Gen 3 that's not on a Gen 2 is right here. It's got this extra kind of bigger tab or protrusion, and this is to prevent over-insertion into your magazine well. So it prevents you from putting the magazine too far up into your rifle. This probably isn't too big of a problem on AR-15 platform rifles, but one of the biggest pluses of a Generation 3 is that it has added versatility with non-AR-15 platform rifles. So if you got a SIG 5.56 or you have some sort of rifle that normally accepts a GI type magazine, you'll be able to use a Pmag with it. So like an H&K 416 or the civilian version of that, the semi-auto version of a H&K 416 is an MR 5.56. So this will work. I haven't tried it personally, but I'm pretty confident. This will fit in an MR 5.56 or H&K 416, whereas I don't think a Generation 2 will. So it does have added compatibility with more rifles than just an AR-15 platform, which is really nice. And part of that is the feature of having this tab so you cannot over-insert your magazine, which in a heated situation is always a plus. The next thing that's a big difference is the base plate. I consider this actually a really big improvement and kind of a big difference. And that is because the base plate on a Generation 2, and this is going to be another thing that's going to be more difficult to show up on camera, but basically a Generation 2 is fatter and a Generation 2 is skinnier. So if you compare it to a GI mag, the GI mag is the skinniest, Gen 3 is in the middle, and then a Gen 2 is the fattest. And the reason why this matters is because, for me, I have magazine pouches that will hold either 2 AK mags or 3 AR-15 mags. If I'm using regular GI mags, they fit in there no problem. If I try and fit 3 Generation 2 Pmags into a 3 mag pouch, they simply really just won't fit. If you kind of jam them in there, you might get them to fit, but then what's going to happen is when you go to pull your magazine up out of your pouch, you're probably gonna pull out the other 2 magazines with it, and then there go 2 mags on the ground. Whereas because this is just skinny enough, you can actually carry these in a 3 mag pouch. So the fact that the base plate is skinnier, I think, is one of the biggest improvements in between a Generation 2 and a Generation 3. So we will actually compare those really quickly. So one way they're different is that in a Generation 2, you take the base plate off from the front, or you push towards the front that way, and then it will come out. Nice and easy. On a Generation 3, it'll actually come out from the back. Come out like so. So here is the Generation 2, and here is the Generation 3, and hopefully Generation 3 says M3 on it right there. Hopefully you'll be able to see that this is a skinnier version of this. When you look at the body of the magazine, you can tell that this has a added notch so that you can put it on this way, making it skinnier, whereas the Generation 2, it goes around, it wraps around the entire body of the mag, making it fatter. So you have to decide how important that is to you or not, depending on how you carry your mags, or if you don't have to at all. But I think the fact that it's skinnier is definitely a very nice improvement. As far as the followers, they are different. The Generation 3 is a different shade of gray. On the front of the follower, this part right here is rounded, especially these corners right here are nice and round, so when it's traveling inside the mag, inside of the body of the mag, I'm assuming it just travels easier, whereas on a Generation 2 it's pointy and squared, and not that there's any problems, but if Magpul decided to go ahead and make that improvement, I'm gonna assume that it's a good improvement. And then if you notice, this is obviously shorter on the Generation 3 than on the Gen 2, but then when you look at the floor plate, you can see that there's an added length right here to make up for the absence of length right here, whereas on a Generation 2 it doesn't have that at all right here whatsoever. On the front there's also an added lip on a Gen 3, whereas there's no added lip right here on the Gen 2. So it's safe to say that the follower and the floor plate have been upgraded. It also looks a bit skinnier right here on the Gen 2 going this way, and a little bit fatter right here. There's a notch on a Gen 2, there's no notch on that. On the Gen 3, there's kind of a little indentation right here on a Gen 3. That's not there on a Gen 2. So improvements to those as well. And just for comparison's sake, we will disassemble the 20 rounder. And as you can see, it's under spring tension, so you want to make sure you hold on to that. And for fun, we got to do the 40 rounder. 40 rounder it says 40 round right here, so you should not have any problems mixing up your floor plate. And just for a quickie comparison, this is the difference in length of a 20 round spring. 20 round spring. compared to the 30 round spring. And then I will compare Gen 3s. This is how much longer the 40 rounder is compared to the 30 rounder. So 40 rounder, 30 rounder. It's about an extra 6 links or so, spring links. And as you can also see, it has a longer piece right here. This is the 40 rounder, this is the 30 rounder, both generation 3. The 40 rounder is longer here, and it also has a different shape completely right here. So there is a difference in the bottom, and it's marked just in case you ever got confused, and is very different from the generation 2s, which are the same. So I just kind of wanted to go over some of the basics, and I hope that I was able to answer any questions if anybody had about the difference between Gen 3s and Gen 2s. I definitely think that the Gen 3s are better. They're worth the extra couple dollars. I'm assuming that after a while the Gen 2s will be phased out eventually, and they'll probably just quit making them. But if you do buy Gen 2s, if you just want to stock up on some mags, they will not come with the dust cover. And I like it having the dust cover because what's nice about a Pmag dust cover is that if you keep your magazines loaded, what the dust cover will do is it has these notches in here for your feed lips. These are your feed lips. And what the dust cover will do is it will push the rounds down just a little bit, like that. And basically what it's doing is it is taking tension off of your feed lips when it's stored loaded. So you can put your dust cover on, push the rounds down just a little bit, and get those feed lips into those grooves of the mag well, so that you don't have to worry, so you can keep your mags loaded if you want and not have to worry about the pressure that's on your feed lips, since it is polymer and not a metal like aluminum or steel. And whether or not you should keep your mags loaded is up to you, but the general consensus is that it is perfectly alright to store your mags loaded. It will not affect the longevity or durability in your spring. What actually wears a spring out isn't keeping it compressed, it's actually compressing it and decompressing it, decompressing and decompressing over and over again. That's what wears out your spring. Going back and forth, not just keeping it loaded or not just keeping it unloaded. So I will wrap up the video with that, and I hope that I answered everybody's questions and hope I was helpful. Thanks for watching.